The amount of yards I'm using to cut this skirt is 3 yards. I have 4 yards here, but I'll be making use of 3 yards because the lower part is not going to be very wide, or the tail at the back is not going to be very wide and very long. So I have ruled out my start line since I am cutting directly on my fabric, and the top is going to be for my seam allowance. The half inch on the top is going to be for my seam allowance. Now I'm going to retake the hip point again since I already have my half inch seam allowance at the waistline. This measurement I am taking on the hip point is to give you a guide on how to take the curve for the hip, like where the hip is going to come out the most and how to achieve a nice curve for that hip. Now I'm going to take the waist to the knee line. For this particular dress, I'm using 19 inches from the waist to the knee line. So the full length of this skirt is about 46 inches long. Hi guys, you're welcome back to Valmich Fits. Today we're going to be learning something very interesting, which is how to cut a mermaid skirt. This is very simple to do, trust me. So this is the fabric I'll be using to cut my skirt. This is a satin fabric, a doll face satin fabric. The fashion fabric for this skirt is a lace fabric. This doll face satin will be for the inner. So now I'm going to take my waist divided by 4 and I'll put a mark down. So this is my waist divided by 4. You do the same thing and put a mark down. Now I'll go down for my hip measurement. This measurement varies in body size and height. For this, I'm going down by 9, 10, 11, 12 inches. The average you go down by is between 7, 8, 9, 10, or 8, 9, 10, 11. So for this, I'm going down by 9, 10, 11, 12. That is the area where I'll take my hip measurement. The amount of yards I'm using to cut this skirt is 3 yards. I have 4 yards here, but I'll be making use of 3 yards because the lower part is not going to be very wide, or the tail at the back is not going to be very wide and very long. So I have ruled out my start line since I am cutting directly on my fabric, and the top is going to be for my seam allowance. The half inch on the top is going to be for my seam allowance. Now I'm going to retake the hip point again since I already have my half inch seam allowance at the waistline. This measurement I am taking on the hip point is to give you a guide on how to take the curve for the hip, like where the hip is going to come out the most and how to achieve a nice curve for that hip. Now I'm going to take the waist to the knee line. For this particular dress, I'm using 19 inches from the waist to the knee line. So the full length of this skirt is about 46 inches long. Now I'm going to take my round hip measurement divided by 4. So I'll put my tape on the hip point area and take my hip measurements divided by 4. This skirt is going to be hip and butt padded with just half inch form, which is like the minimum of all hip and butt pads. So you can do 1 inch for your hip and butt, you can do 2 inches for hip and butt pad. For this, I'm keeping it on the minimal and it's just going to be half inch foam. If you don't know how to make your hip and butt pad, I already have it on my channel. Please enter into my channel and watch the video. So that's my knee measurement divided by 4 and I marked 10 inches there. For my hip measurement, I marked 11.5 inches. So I subtracted 1.5 inch from my hip measurement divided by 4. That was how I got my knee measurement divided by 4, which I marked 10 inches. So connecting these 3 points together from the waistline to the hip to the knee line, that is what I just did over there. Now I'm going to make the curve from the knee line to the hemline or to the floor length for this dress. So if it was an A-line skirt, I would just have to take my ruler and rule a straight line from the knee down to the hemline like this. See the way I'm placing my ruler? That is what I would have done. But I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to create a curve, a nice curve to form this mermaid look. So I'm going to take my measurement from here. This is a dress. I'm making it into a whole dress. So first I'm cutting the skirt before I connect it to make my whole dress. So you can see the length I have here. I marked 60 inches, which is the length to the feet. But to make it flow on the floor, I would add extra 5 inches or 6 inches to this length. You can make yours longer than this. So I'm going to mark what I the new length, which will make it flow to the floor, and I will make a straight line for this length. Of course, you know the length of your dress depends on your height, so that is why mine is measuring 65 inches because of the length of this person. So I'm going to rule a straight line to connect this to indicate where I'll stop when making the mermaid part of this skirt. So now I'm going to fold that part up so you can see this very well. So the next thing I'm going to do is to connect from the knee line to the end of the line that I marked. So I'm going to make a nice curve from the knee line down to the end of where I marked. You can see the way I'm curving out the knee, not straight, it's curved to give you that mermaid effect. So that is exactly what you're going to do. Just make a very nice and beautiful curve from the knee line down to the hemline. Depends on how wide you want the hemline to be. So just watch what I'm going to do here. So as I make the curve from the knee line, I'm going to try to straighten it down to the hemline. So you see how I'm bringing the line out again to have a very nice shape. One thing about this mermaid skirt is how you deepen the knee area, how you curve and deepen that part is the beautiful technique about making a mermaid skirt. If you check out some mermaid skirt designs, you see they start to deepen from below the knee line. That is another way of cutting a mermaid skirt. So if I was going to make an A-line skirt, I would just place my ruler from the knee line and make a straight line from the knee to the hemline. But that's not what we're doing here. Though if you don't know how to cut an A-line or an A-shaped skirt, I have it already on my channel. Please go into the channel and watch that. So you can see how the curve looks like, and please take note the wideness of the lower part totally depends on how wide and full you want the hemline to be. That is the way you're going to fold the fabric in two. After cutting out this front piece, I'm going to measure the hemline to show you guys what I have. Now that we are done with shaping this side out, the next thing I'm going to do is to add my side seam allowance. Remember, I said this dress is going to have hip pads. So what I'm doing right now is, in case you're not going to add hip pads to your dress, this is exactly what you're going to do. But if you're going to add hip pads to your dress, I'm going to explain that later. So from this lower part, I'm going to add 1.5 inches side seam allowance. From the waist to the knee line, I added about 2 inches because I'm going to be adjusting that later to explain about the hip and butt pad. So I'm going to connect this down to the hemline as you can see me do right here. So guys, this is how the hemline looks like right now. You see the space I gave. That's why I talked about folding your fabric with how wide you want the hemline to be. Now I'm going to cut this piece out, and after cutting I'm going to measure the hemline for you guys to see, so that when cutting your fabric you would understand the fullness of how it's going to be on the lower part. Alright, I'm done with cutting out this front piece, and this is what I have. You can see how the shape came out from the waistline to the hemline. So the next I'm going to do right now is to add the allowance for my hip pad. So I'm going to measure the hip line and add my ½ inch allowance for my hip pad. As I said earlier, I'm adding just ½ inch foam for my hip pad. This totally depends on how big you want the hips to be. You can do ½ inch, which will just look so natural. You can do 1 inch, you can do 2 inches. Depends on what you want to do. So I'm adding just ½ inch foam pad for this dress. So I'm going to connect it from the waist right now to the new hips measurement and then to the knee line. You can see what I'm doing right here. I'm connecting the new hips measurement back to the knee line. So I'm going to clean off the first mark so we don't get confused. This will be the new hips measurement. If you don't understand this, please go into my channel. I have a detailed tutorial on hip pads. I'm just trying to mark out this line very well so that it will be more visible for you to see. Though I'm not going to dwell too much on the curve because I already have my side seam well curved out, but I'm still going to mark out this line for you to understand what I mean. So this is how the hip shape will look like if you're adding just half inch for the hip pad. You can see the difference between the first line and the second line. And guys, that is it for cutting out this front piece. And I hope you understand the explanations made here. Now I'm going to measure out the hemline for you guys to see and understand how the fullness is going to be for this lower part. So what I have here is 26.5 inches, including my side seam allowance. I have 26.5 inches. So by the time I sew this dress, you're going to see how it looks like. The next step to take is to measure and cut out the back part for the skirt. So as you can see right now, I have measured the back part of the skirt because my table is not wide enough to place this fabric on. But I'm going to be explaining to you guys everything I did on measuring the back part of this dress. So this part you see marked out is the center back for the dress. You can see the hemline for the center back of the dress. It is longer than the hemline for the front part. So like I mentioned earlier, the hemline totally depends on how wide you want the lower part to be. That is how you're going to be folding your fabric. Guys, you also need to understand that cutting the center back of your dress, especially for a mermaid dress or an A-line dress, depends on how you want the style line for the dress to come out. If you see some mermaid dress, in cutting the center back, once you measure from the waist to the knee line, then you make sort of an angle 90 to form the hemline using the line I ruled across on the knee line. So for the zipper allowance, I added 1 inch on the waistline, 2 inches on the hip line, and then 1 inch on the knee line. For the back dress, I would not be adding any darts. That is why I cut it exactly same with the front side seam. So you can see the curve I have on the center back of my dress. And for the back hemline, I added about 6 inches extra for the length, then connected it back to the side seam of the front piece. That center back is just to give it that long and flowing effect for this dress. So that is all I did for the back piece, and like I said earlier, you can decide to cut the center back of your dress differently using this line I marked across the knee. That will be for another tutorial, not in this tutorial, because it's going to be too long and you will get confused. So now I have cut out the back of this skirt, and this is what I have. If you take note, the extra wideness for the center back hemline is not that much because I don't want it to be very wide and very long. That is why I added just little extras for the center back, but you can do more, even as much as you want it to be. But this is what I am making for this, and that is why it is cut out like this. So this is just the inner for my skirt because the main fabric is going to be a lace fabric. So I decided to cut out my doll face satin fabric first before I use it to cut on my lace fabric, because this is what I would use to cut my lace fabric. Instead of cutting on a pattern paper first, I decided to use my free hands to cut on my doll face satin and then use it to cut my lace fabric. So guys, on my next tutorial, I'll be showing you guys how to cover up your hip and butt pad in another way, and then how to attach it to this very skirt you are seeing right here. So one thing I want you to know about hip and butt pad is that if you use half-inch foam to pad the hips for a slim person, you're going to have a very nice curved looking shape. But if you use the same half-inch foam to pad for a big person, it's going to look like there was nothing in the dress because the person is big. So getting that very nice curvy look as expected or imagined might not be achieved. So for a big person, you can go with 1 inch or 1.5 or even 2 inches for your hips and butt pad. But for a slim person, if you use half-inch foam, you are definitely going to have a visible result. It's going to show that yes, this body is looking curvy and nice. So I'm going to be talking more about this on my next tutorial and show you how to attach the hip and butt pad to a mermaid skirt. Not only that, I'm going to show you a different way of how to cover up your hip and butt pad, like you can see right here. So for this particular dress, of course, I am using half inch for the hips and butt pad, and this dress is for a big person. So at the end of this video tutorial, you're going to see how it looks like on the very person I made this dress for. The person is a big person, so you see the difference between using it for a big person and using it for a slim person. So I have a detailed tutorial on this already on my channel on how to fix your hip and butt pad on your dress, but in a different way. So that dress was made for a slim person. So I would like you to go into the channel and watch that video to see how it looks like, how half inch foam pad looks like on a slim person, and then for this one you'll see how half inch foam pad looks on a bigger person. Also, the both dresses were made with inbuilt corset for the top, including the waist snatching effect for the corset. So you will see a very big difference on the body curves because of the size of hip pads I used for the both dresses. So I used same half inch for the slim person and also for this big person. So if you check both side by side, you see that the slim person will be looking more curvy while the big person will look just normal. Alright guys, we're totally done with this tutorial. Let's save the rest for the next. I don't want this video to get longer than it already is. For now, I'll see you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.